All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final philosophy in the city of the year. So I hope everybody is having a good December so far. I know there's been a lot going on, but we're so excited that you could join us tonight for our topic, which is education and equality. So we have a number of educators here with us tonight who are excited to delve into this topic with us. So just a couple of notes, right? So due to the change in the COVID-19 levels in El Paso County, this Philosophy in the City event is fully virtual. So we've done our best to sort of make it an interactive, engaging event, but if there are technical difficulties, please bear with us. We have some amazing tech folks working in the background who are going to keep us going. So just stick with us and we're going to do the best we can. Okay. And also, I do just want to make a note that this is the final Philosophy in the City event of this year of 2020, but we do have more events coming up in 2020. Can't speak. That's it for the event. 2021. Thank you.
There we go. You got this.
I'm fine. Okay. So we do have a lot more content coming for you. So if you enjoy this, do sort of sign up for the Philosophy in the City email list and we can keep you going there. Tonight's event, as I said, is education and equality. And so we are going to start this event soon. I'm Jen Kling, Assistant Professor of Philosophy at UCCS and Director of the Center for Legal Studies. And I will be co-moderating this event with my colleague.
I'm Dr. Colin J. Lewis. I am an instructor at the Department of Philosophy and Director of the Age Studies minor.
Excellent. And Colin and I will be co-moderating. And now we're going to turn to our panelists so that they can introduce themselves. Rebecca, could we start with you?
Sure, thank you to both of you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here with us tonight. My name is Rebecca Pontieri. I'm right now the principal of the middle school at Atlas Preparatory School here in Colorado Springs. I think just really quickly how I got into education was in 2003 through Teach for America. I taught in the Bronx in New York City for 7 years, taught reading, and then moved to Colorado and then have been at Atlas Prep for the past 10, both as an instructor and then in some different leadership positions. And I'm just really excited to be here with my teammates tonight. So really would love to pass off to Mr. Duncan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. My name is Ben Duncan, also working at Atlas Prep. I am a 5th grade math teacher. Let's see, I have been, and also, let's see, what else? Great 5th grade team level lead. I also am in charge of the math department over there. And let's see, I've been in education now for 7, 8 years, I believe, somewhere around there. Kind of hard to tell nowadays with this year going on. Let's see, and I got into education initially. I'm probably a perfect candidate or prime example of someone who never expected to be teaching ever, especially just with my experience growing up in school. But in college, I volunteered at a local elementary school in a 3rd grade class. Absolutely fell in love with it, changed my major the following semester, and I've been in there ever since. Should I cold call on the next person here? Awesome. We'll go ahead and pass it on over to Karina Clark.
Hey guys, I'm Karina Clark. I am currently a 6th grade ELA teacher, but I definitely started my teaching career in history. So I have been at Atlas for about 4 years now. This is my 3rd year full-time teaching, but I've been with Atlas for a while. And I think my 6th or 7th year of teaching total. I started my career teaching history, but just fell in love with Atlas Prep and middle school and have been teaching ELA for them for several years now. And I'll pass it to Dani.
Hi, I'm Dani Jenkins. I am the school counselor over at Atlas Prep Middle School. Before I was a school counselor, I was an elementary educator out in the Bay Area. Been in education, like Ben, I'm like thinking with this year, about 7 years at this point. And I'm just really excited to be here today and get to talk with you all about education and equality.
All right. Awesome. Thank you all so much. We're so excited to have you here. So if it's okay with everybody, I think I'd just like to start with sort of a simple informational question. So Atlas is a charter school in Colorado Springs. So could you tell us a little bit about sort of what a charter school is and how it's different than the other types of schools we have in the Colorado Springs area?
Yeah, Jen, I can take that one. So Atlas Prep was founded in 2009 within Harrison District 2. So they have chartered us, and so what that means is that we have a charter that's written specifically for Atlas that we have to uphold and we have to meet the terms of. So we are a public school, a traditional public school that receives per pupil funding, and we just, we have no barriers to entry. So we're really similar in that way as far as like who can come to us. And I think it's important to think about too, just that we exist as right now. So we've just opened a kindergarten and first grade. We just opened our elementary this year, and we were kind of designed in 2009, we opened to be like an institution of excellence that would be like an institution in Southeast Colorado Springs, kind of self-contained. So we connect with the district on a lot of things, but technically as a charter, we just have a little more freedom to make a lot of independent decisions about a lot of the ways that we run the school. And we have our own board of directors. So we're not really working directly with the Board of Education in D2 in a lot of ways, but we have our own board of directors. So we have a little bit more kind of freedom and autonomy to do different things with our policies and our programming that is a little separate from the district, although we love them and partner with them and share a lot of families and a lot of resources together as well.
Thank you for that. I think that's really helpful, like definitely for my understanding of what a charter school is. So can I just want to ask a follow-up about that, because I think one of the really interesting things you said was that Atlas has more freedom to make decisions than other schools in your district. Do you think primary education would be better if it were set up nationally as a system of charter schools with more freedom and autonomy at the local level? Or is it better to have sort of the public system that's much more federally mandated with charter schools within that system?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think, there are a lot of right now best practices that are coming out of both of those systems. So, I think one of the things that we value about being a charter in a lot of ways, I think, is just the speed with which we can make a decision or make a pivot to something without needing that to be like full system wide as you might in a district. So I think that's something that we really value. And I think there is a lot of value in that, but you also have to be a place that is really willing to be kind of innovative and to be really strategic. So I think, I don't know, in big terms, I think, we value public education. That's why we're in education. That's why we're here. And we want to make sure that we're obviously like doing the best things for our students and our teachers at all times. And I don't know that in some cases it's very contextual. Like I think depending on the region of the country that you're in or what the picture is like locally for education, I think there are a lot of ways that public charters and traditional public schools partner and kind of help each other just to support an area overall. So I guess I would vote for a combination.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so I just asked because I know that this is one of the classic debates about education, right? So folks often talk about, we need a federal system of public education versus local control versus state control. And so I think it's just sort of an interesting question to delve into. Would anybody else on the panel like to speak to this question, or I have lots of other questions? I don't want to push anybody. But.
Yeah, I guess I have a lot of like thoughts around this topic because a lot of like very traditionally, a lot of the funding for schools comes locally. And so looking for that federal funding and how to make sure that students across the nation are learning the same amount so that when they exit their secondary education, our people, our citizens are all looking like something similar. They have a very similar knowledge base, but I actually really believe that one of the advantages of working in a charter school is we can really look at who we're serving, at like who our students are, and look at the problems and the struggles and the challenges that they face, and really help address those challenges as a community. And I think that's one of the things that Atlas really does best.
If it's okay, I'll build on that just quickly. Yeah, I think, I'll start doing my hand signals. I think that personally for me, I believe in providing choice for those families and for our families and our community. I think that when it comes to what Karina is saying about funding and just, I mean, we can go all day down that rabbit hole right there and down that route for sure. But what it comes down to is providing families with a choice and the ability to have a strong education. And unfortunately, there's some areas where families don't have those choices, and thankfully charter schools provide some sort of an option for them if they would like to pursue that. So for me, a lot of it comes down to that choice factor.
Thank you. I think, right, I always think this is one of the interesting questions to talk about, right? So this freedom, autonomy, choice, but then also like funding plays a role here, right? And so I think we're gonna come back to that. So I think I'd like to turn to, I think what is one of the most broad questions about education that you could probably ask, which is actually a question that I get a lot from my students when we study philosophy of education at UCCS, which is, what is the goal of education, right? Like, what are we trying to do in educating every member of the public? That's a big question. Does anybody want to sort of jump in to get us started? Go for it, Ben.
Oh, perfect.
I see how that went. All right. I'll keep mine rather brief because I feel like, again, this is a route that we can really go down for a long period of time here and get really meta on it. But to me, it really comes down to just a few primary things, which is creating critical thinkers, supporting a student both holistically and also through a whole child approach where we're not just addressing academics, we're addressing the needs of a student, the needs of a community, the needs of a family, everyone. And then transitioning into the fact that it really does take a village to raise a student person, just anything, right? And we are all in this together. And so being able to create that community in an educational setting is incredibly powerful, and being able to just essentially utilize that for everyone and be that resource that anyone can turn to for any reason is huge. So I believe that is, without going down that whole route, just to me, that's what education is.
Yeah, I'll build on that. I completely agree with Ben's idea about like critical thinking. I think that again, I started my teaching career in social studies, and I taught a lot of economics and civics. And so very honestly, even now that I'm teaching ELA, I feel like we need to create lifelong critical thinkers, lifelong learners, people who keep learning over time, even after they leave formal education. And an informed world citizenry. I think that we want people to leave secondary education knowing how to participate in the world in really productive ways. And I just think that's really important, that we have the idea of what students are going to be doing when they leave our educational system in mind, because the goal is not like schools in and of themselves, it's what comes afterward.
I love that, Karina. And what I wanted to add here too was just like, to our school specifically, that is what we are thinking about. We believe that this is about empowerment and this is about opportunity. So that's what I think about a lot, for us and for our middle school, is that our goal is to make sure that our students have as many possibilities as they want when they graduate, that they can do what they are interested in and what their path should lead them to, and that there aren't any barriers to them having the best possible life that they want and that they choose for themselves.
Yeah, and I think that expands to what that means for our country and our world. We have over 50 million children in public K through 12 education in our country. if we can provide a quality education to those students, like there's no downside to that. That's only a benefit to them, but also to us and the future of where our country is going.
Yeah, so I think we have a couple of follow-ups. This is getting into some really interesting conversation here, because both Ben and Karina, you mentioned critical thinking as part of this curriculum, and I mean it's because this is that we teach. We have a critical thinking course in philosophy.
I knew he would pick up on this.
Of course you will.
Philosophy.
Yeah, of course you know, right?
Philosophy.
No, it is. It's interesting. So I mean, I'm not gonna like push philosophy, although I think we should push philosophy. I'll put that aside right now. But my question is, when we talk about critical thinking in the context of primary, secondary education, what do you take to be involved in that, and how could we as educators inculcate critical thinking skills?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was silence.
Yeah.
Like I picked up on that fire. I just always hate to be the first one.
You got it. You've got it. Take it.
So I think that I love that you're asking specifically about elementary and middle school, because that's where the four of us teach, and it can be really hard to imagine what those critical thinking skills look like. And some of that is just foundational knowledge, like how literally does the world go together? How does 2 + 2 = 4? That's the basics of logic. And it's literally modeling thinking. I think that every single one of us can think of someone in our lives, and not to be mean, but who doesn't think. I'm like, just take 2 seconds and think of that person in your life who doesn't think. And then remember that you actually have to teach thinking. You have to model what thinking looks like, because you could model some crazy ways of thinking, or you can model really logic, science-based ways of thinking. And I think we do that in every single like area in our school. So I know that our math group, and Ben can speak more to this, we teach like very broad skills, math facts, and problem solving skills, because that's a big thing that kids are going to have to deal with more and more as they grow. In ELA, it's, reading stories, and you have to be able to interpret what's going on, which involves deeper thinking. It looks beyond the surface level. Our science programming is extremely hands-on and very experimental, which means we have kids predicting and making hypotheses based on what they know, which is extended thinking, and definitely critical. And then our social studies, of course, is providing a lot of data for our students to look at and interpret and learn how to kind of understand what's happening in the world. I'm going to throw it over to, I think it is Dani first.
It in fact is. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I think it goes to everything that Karina just said, because she just like hit every single category that I think we like see our kids really practicing in school. But I also think it takes it out of that realm, and even out of our comfort zone as educators. Our students are growing up in a time where they have so much access to media, more than like some of us can even fathom. And so taking those critical thinking skills and meeting kids where they're at. So, I mean, we saw it this summer where TikTok was becoming a medium where kids were using it to like rally and mobilize. So how do we also help them to analyze sources, not just that they're used to seeing in the academic world, but then taking that and applying it to spaces like that, thinking about, is this a source that I'm going to trust? Is this information that, using my critical thinking skills that I've gained in school, that I'm going to like put my own energy, time, and effort into? And then really finding the space for them to practice those skills and reinforce them, just like Karina was saying.
I think it might be me next. Doing my best in that chat. Yeah, I think that like both Karina and Dani have said, so much of it really comes down to the fundamental foundational understandings of things. I'll speak kind of just as a math teacher, kind of put on that lens for a second, or put on that hat. Really, the classes being about the why, and why do numbers work? What are numbers? Let's develop that number sense. It doesn't matter if you get the correct answer. It doesn't matter if you are able to follow 4 steps for long division. It doesn't, like, that doesn't matter. What matters is, can you approach a problem you've never seen before with your fundamental understanding of numbers and figure it out on your own? And so really challenging and pushing for that, and then taking that the next step of having critical and challenging conversations and discussions with each other. In my classroom, or virtual classroom, right? We're constantly having discussions in breakout groups, and these are 5th graders who are having those conversations and saying, hey, I agree with this. I respectfully disagree with this. And we provide that space for them, and we're able to model that. And the fact that they're able to take those skills and then apply them outside of the classroom in this academic setting to respectfully challenge other people, but also listen and have those fully informed discussions where, again, they're listening, because I feel like there might be a lack of that in the world at this point, where they're able to do that and develop those skills. So really, again, addressing it from like that whole child approach, right? But again, being able to challenge each other, have discussions, whether it's academically related or not.
Yeah, I think the only thing I wanted to add is just that I think that these 3 amazing people and our staff are just, they're so good at making a lot of what we do in our content classes discussion based. And that's really important at our school, because we believe in having like a really high culture of error. Like, it's fine to make mistakes. It's helpful to make mistakes. Like, please, thank you for making that mistake, so we can dig into why this is so helpful to us. And I think, our staff overall is just like, they're so good at helping a student like grapple with something that's uncomfortable. It's okay to not know the answer. And we just gave a student perception survey recently. And one of the things that I think we were really happy to see was that it was a really highly rated question from the students, that it's more important at Atlas to understand something than it is to get the right answer, which is kind of like gold to our ears.
Yeah, I was going to say, you are speaking my language right now, like philosophy, right?
Do you want to do the audience question?
Yeah, so we have a question from the audience.
It's a really good question, actually.
Yeah, that I think sort of ties in directly to this discussion that we're having, and also ties into our theme of the evening, which is education and equality, right? So thank you, audience member. So the question is, how do you identify and adapt for students who might need an alternative mode of learning or means to learn, right? So the example the audience member gives is kinesthetic versus auditory, right? So how do you identify and then lean into that adaptation to make sure that students get what they need in terms of learning and the sort of critical thinking and understanding that we've been speaking about?
I'll share a thought on that. I think first off, that's a fantastic question. And that's something that's constantly being discussed in the world of education. There is no magic bullet here. There's no silver bullet here. I think that it's about engaging with students in a variety of ways constantly. Education should not be what many of us have traditionally experienced, where you're sitting and you're just learning, or sorry, not learning. You're just sitting and you're looking like ahead, right? You're looking at, it should be learning. Oh, all right. You're sitting facing forward, right? Facing the front of the classroom. Teacher stands in one place. You're sitting, you're filling out notes. Then you have 10, like if we're talking about math, then you have like 10 questions, 20 questions you need to figure out, just follow this list of questions or list of steps and then move on, right? That's not what education should be, or not what it needs to be. And it's not what our students need. We need more than that. We need to be able to engage in all of those practices. And so personally, a few things that I do in the classroom. One is exploring with manipulatives, making it a requirement that students are able to actually, they have to use manipulatives, and not just there as a tool. So understanding that, for example, and this goes back to like that number sense and how things work. Can you prove to me how you solved this question using this manipulative over here, or this, or by drawing it, not just writing it, but also drawing it, and maybe writing something about it as well, like to continue to push in that way. that really shows that fundamental understanding versus, oh yeah, I follow these 4 steps again for long division repeatedly, right? Or something like that. How is it working? And challenge yourself to do that. In class, we do a math rap at the beginning of every class. Yeah, it's a whole thing. Dani is a great model at this, by the way. So I'm just gonna leave that out there, see where it goes. But where every single day you can literally hear it from the hallway. I'm sure Karina can attest to this, and Rebecca and Dani as well. But just at the beginning of every class, we do this math chant, and students are doing things with their hands. They're reciting their multiples. There's a lot of actually strategies that are going on in there. So it's engaging kinesthetic learners. We're doing it orally. It's provided oratorily. There's a list provided for those students that need that support, that are still working on the foundational skills. Then in classes, we're doing a lot of investigations and things like that as well. So students are figuring things out for themselves. So I think it's a constant challenge. It's something teachers are always trying to figure out that balance. And some days we get it, some days we don't. But again, it's that constant learning process for us. And I'm going to leave that one.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that really speaks to the way in which educators are so flexible, right? I know that in sort of college education, right, we kind of have this model of the sage on the stage. And so, no, I mean, we do, right?
It's not necessarily a great model.
It's not a great model, but it's the model that we have. So it's really cool to hear about all of these alternative methodologies, right, that are being used in sort of primary education, in sort of elementary and middle schools. So awesome. So I want to dig in a little deeper to the sort of question of the evening, right? So I do social and political philosophy. So I actually teach on issues of justice, freedom, equality. And one of the things that my students always get really incensed about is equality versus equity, right? And they keep telling me there's this deep important difference, and I'm like, y'all just easy on that first. You don't even know what justice is. We can't be talking about that. But so would one of you be willing to speak a little bit about the difference between equality and equity in education specifically?
Yeah, I can take that.
Thank you.
This will be again, the surface level definition. I encourage anyone and everyone to do a little bit more digging. Otherwise, I could take up the whole rest of the hour that we have talking about this. So equality means that we are providing the same resources, skills, and tools to people regardless of need. And a way to think about this is equality and equity in education would really only ever be the same if the playing field was even. So if everyone was already starting at the same point, they might look similar. However, children are different and children have different needs. So no 2 children in any one class, kind of as Ben was speaking to, are the same. They're probably not going to learn the same. They just have different things that are going to help them to learn and help us to get them where they need to be along the way. So with equity in mind, we would be providing the tools, skills, and resources that a child would need to be learning at the same rate as other children who might not have that same need.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful, right, for describing this. I think what it is an important difference between equality and equity, right? So it sounds like, sort of based on previous answers, and then Dani, your answer, one of the things that y'all are really focused on is equity, right? Is providing resources, is providing skills, providing adaptations for different kinds of learners. So one question that we just got from the audience, we have a super engaged, awesome audience. So audience is amazing, thank you. So a question that I think speaks directly to this issue is our audience member asks, are these adaptive equity-based strategies scalable, right? So you're doing it in one school. Is this a model that can be used successfully in other contexts, in other schools?
I think an important aspect of that question is to look what equity means. And sorry, I was off Zoom for like a few seconds there. But equity looks at like creating a level playing field for everyone to start from the same place to be able to get up to that knowledge point. And so I think it is scalable, but I think that in recognizing that, you have to say that it's not going to look the same in every school, right? Our particular group of students doesn't have the same needs as maybe a group of students that Rebecca taught in Brooklyn, right? Or that would look the same as a group of students that we might see even in Pueblo, so very close to here, because they have a really different kind of community. They have very different kinds of needs. We are working in a city space, but we're also working with a particular demographic within that space. So yeah, I think that absolutely an equity model is scalable, but that doesn't mean that, just like equality versus equity, that doesn't mean one size fits all, and it's going to look different in every iteration.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's really helpful to sort of remember, right, the sort of problems of scale, right, but then the ability to work within different contexts. So I think there's a question we've kind of started to tiptoe around. So because I'm a social and political philosopher, I'm just going to dive into it, and you can't stop me. One of the things that often comes up, well, it's true.
It is true. It's very true.
One of the things that often comes up when we start using words like equity, right, like adaptations, like meeting every student where you are concerns about social justice, right? Because equity is often considered in questions of social justice. So I'd like to ask really broadly, does social justice considered broadly have a place in public education? Or should education sort of strive to be kind of value neutral in some way? Or is that even possible, right? So is social justice in education? Talk to me, folks.
Karina, did you want to, I think Karina had a clarification first. By adaptation, do we mean accommodating learners?
Yes. So when I said adaptation, I was sort of referencing the earlier question, right, which was how do you ensure that you have strategies to speak to students who are learning in different ways, at different rhythms, at different rates.
Okay, so the language that we tend to use in education around that, so especially when some of these modifications become very like, I guess like technical and like they're very necessary to give to students, we talk about accommodations and modifications. So modifications are like when we actually change what the curriculum is so that we can adapt to kids. And then accommodations are just like things that we add in so that kids can still work in that same curriculum, but still achieve that. So yeah, just I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same thing. We talk about accommodating all the time. But I think that Dani had a great answer for your social justice.
Yeah, so does social justice belong in education? My short answer is absolutely. My longer answer is actually like as a school counselor, I can say my own position, school counselor, it's actually written to our ethical code. School counselors as social justice advocates support students from all backgrounds and circumstances and consult when their competence level requires additional support. So this means that not only am I a social justice advocate, but it also means that I need to push myself to learn and grow when I'm not qualified to be one. And I would also just like preface that us being advocates in our school community and in our greater community as well can actually make a huge difference for a lot of our students in terms of their mental health. Definitely like no coincidence that like suicide rates and self-harm are significantly higher in the LGBTQ plus community. It's also not a coincidence that when we are able to create safe and supportive communities with affirming relationships, that those rates go down. And so by being an advocate in our school community and by being involved in social justice, we can start to create those spaces for our students. And in my mind and in my opinion, we are not doing our job if we are not being advocates for our students and if we're not being involved in social justice.
Just waiting for a minute just to feel how that felt to hear. Great answer, Dani. I think, for me, something I would just want to bring up here is that this is actually why we exist. This is why our school exists. We were founded, again, I said this in 2009 in Southeast Colorado Springs for very specific reasons. This is the most underserved area of our community. And we have a population of students this year that's 94% free and reduced lunch. 94% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. So nationally, it's like 40% is when a school begins to get Title I funds that they can use for full school programming that's meant to support everyone and lift up students who might be more disadvantaged. So that's 40%. We're at 94. That's our general. That's the general number that we tend to operate with, and that's the local picture. We are. This year, it's 80. I think it's 83% Latinx students that identify as Latinx. There's about 8%, 9% who selected Black as demographic. There's 6% white and 2% other. And I think just the bigger picture of Southeast Colorado Springs is also just something really important, I think, to talk about here. We are there to be a long-term excellent educational option for students and families in the area. And that is because the playing field is not equal. Nationally, the playing field is not equal in our city. And that is the reason why our staff also work at our school. Like, we have this unbelievably passionate group of people who are all there for really deep purposes that is like their life's work. Like, these are people who are so intelligent and so dedicated and so passionate about the students that we teach and the families that we serve and work with. No one is there for any other reason other than to become connected with this community of people and to support them, not from above or from outside, but really with them. I think we're always going to be growing with that and learning and doing better things, but we are a purpose-driven place and a mission-driven place that is specifically meant to add to the benefit of students who really need a lot and who have been severely underserved and under-resourced and who are facing a lot of opportunity gaps in their lives that we intend to fill. Or I guess I'd say rather bridge for them. We're not filling anything, that language is wrong, but we want to make sure that they have, like I said before, just the ability to make those decisions for themselves, but that we're helping them make sure that that's a reality.
Yeah, so we have a couple of follow-ups. One actually is relevant to this notion of even playing field. This actually comes from the Commonson part. So this is actually, it's an expression we hear a lot, even playing field in education. I'm really curious, are you willing to elaborate? What exactly is an even playing field? What does it look like? And how do we get there? What kinds of tools, what kinds of methods are we using to get us closer to this even playing field?
And I think I can start that. I jumped over Karina. You want to go? Okay, we'll just tag team, okay? So yeah, I think just to start it, maybe the first question, or the first part of that question, like what does an even playing field look like in education? I think it's when a student of any background who comes from any zip code anywhere in the United States can choose what they want to do after they graduate high school. Where would they like to go to college? Where would they like to serve? Would they like to join the military? Would they like to go into the trades? Would they like to join a trade union? Would they like to, whatever the thing might be, that all students have been prepared with the actual, like, very rigorous skills and ways of thinking that would allow them to be competitive in any of those circumstances of their choice. I think that's what it looks like. As far as how we get there, I think we can unpack that for quite a long time. We can tell you how we do that. But how about I'll pass to Karina, and then you can pass it back to me if we want to talk about like specifics of what we've seen to be successful at Atlas.
Yeah, I'd like to build on what Rebecca said there. Not only like do they get to choose, but they know what all of those options are and what they look like. I think that we've had really weird messaging, at least when I was growing up through school, like what does post-secondary life look like? And I think that having students know that there are a variety of options open to them and that they have the ability to choose and start their life in a really meaningful and informed way, like they know what to do, they know what's coming next, and they know that they have a support system to help them do that. And I think that support system part is really important. I think that a lot of what the work that we do goes back to that opportunity gap situation that Rebecca was talking about. And some of those opportunity gaps aren't readily apparent. Like it might be obvious that a student who does not have a phone or a computer at home is going to be probably less prepared to go into a job where they're going to have to type. And so it gets like down to the specifics of that. And we as a school have made huge motions to close the technology gap, for example, that a lot of our students deal with on a day-to-day basis. And we have computers out with our, I think we have them out with our elementary school. Rebecca will have to, yeah, we have computers out to our kindergarten and first graders, as well as our middle schoolers, as well as our high schoolers. One thing that Atlas does is we provide all of the educational materials that students might need. We make sure that they have books in their hands so that they can take them home and read them. We have extensive reading programs and also make sure that the books that we learn from go home with them so that students, just like, you know, we as adults can read them again and continue learning as we grow as people. But some of those opportunity gaps aren't always as obvious. I mean, we can talk about free and reduced lunch and we can talk about those things and you can think of the normal ones, but even things like having access to mental health care and a support system. For some students, our school is their support system. Last year, I had a student who really very much struggled and we teamed with Mr. Duncan, actually his former 5th grade teacher who he had a great relationship with, and he went and saw Mr. Duncan daily and they talked about how his day was going and how it could go better. So it's not like you leave 5th grade and you become a 6th grader and like there's a closed off world. There's really a community and a support system. One other brief example, we had a student that recently moved to Florida and she was struggling to get her records and make sure that she could get into the correct grade and lots of complications. And she reached out to 6 or 7 of our Atlas teachers asking for help. And I think that's so novel just because, I mean, when I left a school, I would never have imagined reaching out to a former teacher, but she reached out to me to help her with math problems that she had and Miss Pontieri to help with the records. And like very legitimately, like 7 teachers came together and we helped this kid out. So I think the support system and how to build a support system is a huge indicator of success for later in life. And I think that's something that we teach too, which is an opportunity gap that most people don't think about.
Karina got to a lot of this, so I'll keep mine pretty brief. I think that also speaks to the advisor relationships we have at Atlas, where we are constantly listening to student needs and trying to make sure that we are meeting those needs to support our students. We are like working to get our entire set of schools, elementary, middle, and high, better trained on trauma-informed practices too, so that we can just start to meet kids wherever they're at. It's not going to like level the playing field right away, but again, just having those open lines of communication with kids and having that extra base of knowledge about like what trauma looks like in the classroom is one of those steps that we are taking as a school.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That was sort of really nice to kind of get a picture of the role that y'all see social justice playing, right? And how it can work towards a level playing field, right? But some of the difficulties as well. So we have another question from the audience that I think is directly related. And so this question is actually asking about your students, right? And so it says, how early are students learning in schools these days about contemporary social and societal issues? Is this a change in recent years, right? In response to the, well, we'll call it the politicalization of everything, right? Or is this something that's always happened in schools And it's just that people are more aware of it now and sort of calling it social justice, whereas before we might have just called it education. Looks like Karina, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that that's a difficult question because there's a lot to unpack about the history of pedagogy, and there have been social justice movements in pedagogy for a very long time, all the way back to the early 1900s with like Dewey, or sorry, 1800, I think. Dewey was talking about democracy in education, which I think is definitely, I think there's a historical kind of path to getting to social justice in education. But it is definitely more modern under that name for sure. If anyone wants to jump in on that. It's kind of a rough question to break down.
It is.
Yeah, there's a lot of great parts to that question. I think I would maybe pull apart like two of those things. I think one could be that I guess it is maybe more recent that educators talk about culturally responsive teaching, and that a lot of research has gone into what that is, and how to make sure that what we're teaching is reflective of the cultural background from which our students come. I think there's a lot to unpack there, and there's a lot of things our school is still learning about that. So I guess I would just name that. And then I think, secondly, I think we are a school that does try to do that. And again, we're always going to be learning more about how to do that better and better, especially because there's a pretty stark difference between the demographic of our students and the demographic of our teachers and staff, that we have an obligation to learn more about that and to fix that. But I also think our version of social justice, like, yes, we do, there are a lot of things in our curriculum or in various grades that you could probably say like might be connected to social justice. Like, for example, our 8th grade ELA, like Karina can talk a lot about ELA, but has like an essential question that's about empathy and how do you create justice in the world. That does happen. But I think as an institution, what we think about is that our results are the thing that create justice for our students. Like, we believe that to be an amazing school, to get amazing results for students with them, is the thing that we're here for, that is the reason we exist, and that creates justice for kids. Like, that is our work. Like, we're not going to be doing anything, we're always going to be evolving, but we're not going to be doing anything new, next year on that note. Like, that is our way to provide social justice, is to make sure that our students, that our results turn into real tangible options for them when they're older.
Just want to build on what Rebecca is saying there about some of our essential questions that we use to guide our reading. I know that I have taught multiple civil rights books. We definitely look at authors who are Native American or representing Native American positions. We have books that look at Hispanic backgrounds and positions and characters and really look at different perspectives. And I want to just include the thought here that we're not trying to sell something to our students. Part of the tie back to critical thinking is that we really allow students to investigate and represent their own experiences in the world as we look at these social justice issues. So we're not teaching them that this is the right way. We're teaching them that you have to learn how to deal with the world, because this problem is going to come back to you some other time, or this question, or someone is going to challenge your view at some point. And this is a topic that's kind of happening. So you need to have a thought. You need to think about it. You need to take it from your own perspective. So we don't discourage students from representing their own identities or their own experiences in those moments, no matter what their backgrounds are. In fact, I think we encourage them honoring those experiences and identities that they're developing. So for example, I know our 6th grade is reading The Outsiders in the spring, and our question is, how do you decide who you are? Which again is very self-investigatory, but that's a book that talks about gangs. It's a book that talks about substance abuse. It's a book that talks about a lot of the really difficult things in life that students may be hearing about, seeing, or experiencing. And we have to ask the question, how do you deal with that when you experience that in life? And it's not selling them an answer. It's It's really investigating their own views and how to develop those own views. So I think it's important that as we are a social justice group, we're also not determining the views of our students in that way.
Yeah, so this is just so interesting because I'm thinking about my own experience, right, sort of in the college classroom where I take myself to be, right, so I teach politics and the law, right? Everybody's always like, oh, philosophy, it's boring. And I'm like, my class is not boring. You just haven't been in there when we get going on whatever political theory of the day, right? But it sounds like in many ways, right, your focus on equity, right, the focus on, hey, I'm not going to tell you what to think about this, but I'm going to tell you that like this is occurring, and so you should have, as you say, have a thought, right? I'm wondering how much conflict do you all see with what you're teaching versus maybe what students are bringing from their own identities, right? Or especially from their homes or from their responsible adults, right? Do you run up against sort of, I guess what I would call being like professory for a second, ideological conflicts often? Does that happen in your school? And if that does, how do you handle that as social justice advocates, right? As equity advocates?
I'll start. I think one thing that this just makes me think about is, so our school has 3 pillars: education, character, community. And I think I just want to talk about the community one there a little bit. We have family teacher conferences 5 times a year at our school, which is far above and beyond what a lot of places are able to do. And we have really tight connections and tight communication between our teachers and our families. And that is, and these 3 can talk way more about that because they're the ones who are doing it every day. Ben and Karina are like, I'm sure they've sent at least one text to a parent today, like maybe put up how many that's been, but they're so connected. And we have an advisor system where like basically each teacher has like a set of ducklings that's like their students that they're mostly connected to, and that's the funnel between the school and the family. So a family is not like, reaching out to the ELA teacher and then the math teacher and then the whatever. It's like to connect relationally, which we think is really important. We have over 95% attendance from our families at these family teacher conferences. So we meet with them 5 times a year and they all come. We talk to all of them. And I think what I'm bringing that up to say is that we're trying to make sure that we're honoring what our families are looking for in their students' education. And that is a huge part of how we're designed and our mission and our programming. We aren't here, to tell this group of students or their families like what to think or what to do, but we want to make sure that what we're doing is honoring what they hope for their own children, and making sure that that's really where the money is. Like we're so connected to our families that I think even if there are ever any sort of questions from a family about our intent of something or honestly any kind of disagreement on anything, like why is my grade this way, what happened with my student on Tuesday, anything is really handled through this beautiful advisor relationship and these like amazing connections that our teachers have with families. It's so relational and it's so trusting, it's so open. They are just like completely with us and we're so grateful for that. So I'll stop there and wonder if anybody else wants to talk about the connections with families that we have there.
Mine's going a little bit back to the like ideological differences. I think whenever that happens, Jen, like I recenter my brain in curiosity, where I just need to be curious about where our students and our families are coming from and how they got there, because I can't support them unless I understand that direction. I think that's also a huge part of just being like a culturally responsive educator, is like always having that curiosity first and foremost and kind of putting my own ideology on the back burner until I get that clearer picture.
Ben, did you want to build on an earlier idea?
At this point, it's all blending together, so please go ahead first.
I was going to make this a little more concrete. As an ELA teacher who teaches social justice-oriented books, yes, we do run into ideological differences, often with students more so than with parents, though this year I've definitely experienced that. It is hard, and all three examples that I'm thinking about right now have had to do with race. I think it's a hot topic. I think it's a hot button topic. I think it's something that we like to talk about critical conversations in our school. You have to have them. And that means that emotions are going to be running high for all stakeholders. That means the student has emotions about it, the parent has emotions about it, the teacher has emotions about it, the community has emotions about it. Some of our students really find talking about social justice and empowering different identities empowering. And some of them respond with trauma. Like very real trauma, which I know Dani can speak more to. But I've definitely had students who have responded in what looks like in a typical school disciplinary act, like misbehavior, like really just shouting out, argumentation, getting to the point of like throwing things. And you really have to investigate what the student or what the parent is experiencing. And I had a
It's a cliffhanger.
It looks like we're back. Okay, sorry about that. That was our infamous technical difficulty, which is, we knew it was coming, so now we've had it. Let's see, when we got cut off, Karina was speaking. Ben, did you have a follow-up, or are you good to go?
Yeah, I can build on while we're waiting for Karina. I was really just going to connect back to this lens of inquiry, really, and this approach that Atlas does have and takes towards just in general towards everything, and just the idea of breaking the notion in a more traditional setting of school or education setting that making the student fit into the school versus making the school fit around the student and around the community, right? And being there as that support, and just the idea that like that's where Atlas takes it versus more that traditional approach, and just also the idea of empowering our student voices, which is what kind of Karina was mentioning as well, of letting our students know that their voices really do matter. Like they really matter. And that's something we model every day, whether it's in a physical classroom or a virtual classroom, of their voice matters. They should speak for themselves. They should advocate for themselves. What does that look like? How do we develop healthy language around that? Which is a very challenging thing, and something that takes a lot of time, even for adults to do, or get to that point of, right? It takes a lifetime to get there. But just really prioritizing that as a school. And that's just another piece of the puzzle that we're trying to put in place there for our community as a whole.
Sorry, I'm not sure where I disappeared in the conversation.
Oh,
you can't hear me.
Okay, go ahead.
Should I go?
Yeah, go.
I'll go. Yeah. So I got a bit of a follow-up actually, because this is really interesting. And one of the things I'm interested in is the fact that Atlas does have this very strong focus on student empowerment and community building. And this isn't really a feature that you see, at least in my experience. I don't know how your education was, but for me, it wasn't really strongly emphasized in public schooling. And I think it's interesting because we've done studies on this. We see that when you do community building focus in schools, ethics building focus in schools, there's a weird correlation, it turns out, with academic performance from students. And so I'm really curious, first of all, do you see this kind of correlation yourselves with your students between community building and performance? And if so, why do you think these two features tend to go together as they do?
Nice.
I'm going to jump on and just say I really think that this is promoted. You've heard about our advisor system quite a few times now, and this is the school partnering very closely with a direct contact with families. And I think that it's good to remember that education doesn't just happen inside the classroom, it also happens at home, especially right now when we're all virtual, it's all happening at home. And so we need home to help. And by talking to parents, by keeping in line, by knowing the siblings of the student who are learning in the background, by knowing the other teachers' voices you can hear, I think you really do see a community created. And you know, an older sibling can walk by and I can say hello to Miranda as her little brother is learning from me. And she's almost supporting his learning in my class because she knows me, this kid's family knows me. And I think that's really what it becomes, is that we're all there together, we understand each other and what the goal is, and that creates a huge support system that students don't always have. Parents are not always as connected to the schools as we achieve.
You know, I wonder, is that okay?
Yeah, go, please, go.
I think that this might be a good time too, to just explicitly say something that we really have learned, like longitudinally, is that the longer students are with us, the higher their academic performance is, just in a nutshell. If you were to follow a group of students that starts with us, by the time they leave 8th grade, the results are absolutely staggering. And at this point, our school has been named a Center of Excellence in Colorado. And so I guess one way to talk about this is that we haven't gotten into like assessment and data or test results, but I'm just gonna broach the subject a little bit, which is that on one of the tests that we give that is a measure of growth, a normative assessment, not the state test. We have students who are coming into our school with maybe 23% in math, and around that, say maybe a little higher in the 30% range, at or above the norm for math and for reading. So if the norm nationally on this test is 50%, then we have a significant amount of students coming to us who are below the norm. And by the time they leave, that really for us has flipped to be the opposite. So when we have students leaving 8th grade now, we're looking at around in the 80%. We have over 80% of students who are above the norm in math when they leave, and over 65-70% of students who are at or above the norm in ELA. And that's pretty extraordinary when you know that the norm just nationally is 50%. So I think, that's really important, because part of the reason we've been able to get there, to be able to do that, is because of consistency and because of the type of community that everybody's talking about here. Like, that existing over a span of time can get you, I think, that change over time. It's not going to happen in a year. We know that these things take time to happen, and with that kind of consistent investment and that kind of consistent environment that a student is kind of growing up with us within, then that's how we can sort of support them to get there. Hence one of the reasons we have the elementary school now, which is essentially enrolled with siblings of our middle school and high schoolers, who are just unbelievably adorable. But if those students now are with us from kindergarten until 12th grade, and their families give us that connection, and they give us that time, and they entrust us with their students' lives, then what we want to be able to do is fulfill that promise, to make them, to help get them to a place where they really can do whatever they want when they leave.
I'd just like to build on that. I know Rebecca told you it doesn't happen in a year, but I almost just want to disagree with her. I know the students that had Ben last year are going to come up to me knowing how to be successful.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's crazy. It's so totally crazy, because we even look at the growth they made from the beginning of 5th grade to the end of 5th grade. And then you look at the growth that they make from the end of 5th grade to the end of 6th grade, knowing they've had those 5th grade teachers, and I think that has to do with two things. Yes, we have a whole community that is teachers and students and principals and families, but I also think that our community as a staff and our connection and our united front as a staff allows students to really understand that here at Atlas, you're cared about, you're respected, we're here to help you, and we're gonna get you the tools you need to be successful when you go up next year to Miss Clark's class in 6th grade, or when you go up next year to Miss Dudley's class in 7th grade. Like, we really talk about it that way. And I think that we as a community try to set kids up for success, because we know what our trajectory is, and that trajectory can be from Ben to 12th grade, from 5th to 12th grade, or it can be from 5th to 6th grade. But very truly, the longer kids, even up 1 year in Atlas, see massive growth compared to their first year peers.
This is amazing. And I would like to put in a petition that you send every single one of your students to my classes at UCCS. Because,
or mine.
Or Collins.
Yes.
Mostly mine.
Mostly hers.
But Collins too.
Me too.
Because this sounds amazing. And as
how many of our high schoolers will you accept next year? Let's see.
All of them.
Yeah.
We will take all the students.
How many scholarships will you be offering?
Tell all the high school teachers that this is on lock.
Right?
100% acceptance.
100% acceptance rate.
Yes.
I cannot guarantee anything like that, but it does sound like, right, you're teaching students like sort of all of the skills really that college educators look for. And now I'm a social political philosopher. I can talk about social issues and political issues all night. But I do want to turn us just a little bit at this point, because I'm also a political economist. So this is another one of my areas. And one of the things that I think we've been like vaguely alluding to, and now I just want to go after it, is the idea that none of this wonderful growth, right, and wonderful moves towards equity and towards trying to level the playing field despite obstacles, right, can happen without money. And so I want to bring up this point, right? So whenever I teach political economy and education, right, I always get the student who raises their hand, who says, look, I hear what you're saying, Dr. Kling, but money can't fix schools. Only teachers can fix schools. And so, right, so this idea that like money can't solve education, money can't fix an education system, that just like weirdly like economics doesn't have a place in discussions about education and equity. So I just wanted to sort of hear your thoughts about this, right? Is it true? Like economic discussions should not be in discussions of education, or should we be looking at the money? It looks like Dani's ready to jump in.
Absolutely. I would love if we lived in like a imaginary make-believe world where money didn't fix problems. I do think that money without a logical, like evidence-based plan will never fix a school. But it definitely doesn't hurt, especially if you look at the barriers that I think really came to light in the past school year, with COVID-19, with us going into remote learning. Schools that were prepared resource-wise were more able to do so to get kids online and on a faster timeline. Just the gap in time that those students whose schools had more resources had in their education was much, much smaller, if at all, in some circumstances. And like those are often schools that are coming from places with greater budgets and fewer budget constraints. And so a greater budget does mean more resources for students. It means more mental health resources. It means greater academic resources. And it means greater opportunities to expand our students' horizons. So money's not going to fix the system, but I think spent wisely, it definitely can't hurt the problem.
I'm going to bring it to a concrete place. So we use a product called Pear Deck to help teach our students. It helps keep them highly engaged. And if you know anything about education, high engagement is the #1 way to see learning increases in students. The longer you can keep them engaged and the more highly engaged in thinking you can keep them, the better the learning gains. Now, I cannot, as a personal teacher, afford to pay $150 for that premium Pear Deck. However, my school is amazing, and it applied for federal funding and federal grants. And our school recently was able to get the funding to have it available to all teachers to be able to use this amazing tool, which is highly interactive, even in a virtual space for our students. And I'm sure it's not $150 per teacher, but even $50 per teacher at our school can go a really long way in providing a resource to keep students highly engaged. And the other thing I'm going to say about money in education is one of the hardest things to do is to get teachers in the classroom and get them to stay there. And the way that you do that is by having good teacher preparation programs and helping students complete those programs to success. And if there's a place where we need to put money to have highly trained teachers who are prepared to go into the workforce to create this equity that we're looking for students, it's got to start where you guys are. It's got to start at the college level so we can create teachers that can come back to our communities and really serve.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned this, because we don't often think, at least from my perspective, about how much schools invest in teacher development. Most teachers don't just come, fresh off the assembly line and just go teach, right? There's supposed to be a further refinement process as you go. There's to be professional development for teachers, and that is an expense. That isn't that has to be invested in as much as the other aspects of the infrastructure of the school. So I'm glad you bring this up. Yeah.
Yeah, so good. And I think this is a little bit, this is related, I think, but slightly different where I wanted to go. So forgive me for like cold calling all of you. But I
don't have to apologize for cold calling. We're all very comfortable with that.
Okay, cool. So just because, as is my want, I think I want to talk about one of the elephants that's in the room in terms of primary education, right? Which is that sort of looking at the screens, right? I can't help but notice like there's a lot of white faces on this Zoom call, right? And we are talking about underserved. Well, I said I was going to do it.
You're right. Yeah.
This is what I do. I'm just like, there's an elephant. Let me poke it with a stick. But there are, right? Like we're all, I mean, I think you all are real educators and we're sort of educators by proxy. We try hard. But it's a lot of white faces, right? And I do think one of the things that's true when you're talking about education and equality or education and equity more broadly, right, is talking not only about sort of teacher pipeline problems, right, which is getting highly trained teachers into classrooms, but also the problem of getting highly trained teachers into classrooms who look like students in our most underserved communities. So I was wondering if you could speak maybe to that issue a little bit, or if you'd be willing to.
Funnily enough, I was actually reading an article about this today. I follow a group called TMPT that published the opportunity myth, and one of their big pushes, so the opportunity myth is about everyone has the same opportunity. It's talking about the reality of these opportunity gaps we've talked about. And one of their big pushes is to get teachers of color into the classroom. And that in order to do that, funding is a major thing, that community and support systems have to be created. And you have to, I think something that I saw when I was teaching at the college level student teachers was that you have to find people who want to give back to their community. I taught several students who came from Pueblo and wanted to become teachers and then go back to Pueblo to look at rural education and the problems they're dealing with there. And so I think that you have to invest people in communities, which I think Atlas does. In fact, we have several graduates of Atlas who in the last 2 years have actually said that their goal once getting into college was to become a teacher and to come back and to teach in their own communities. So I think that there needs to be a value of education, first of all, and we need to invest people in their own communities and realize that this is a fundamental resource for growing those communities. You can't just grow up and go to the big city. We have to make these communities. So I think that by being supportive in that rate, and building that want and that need to come back to your own community and educate that community is a huge push we have to make as a nation.
So let me follow up on this if I could. Sorry, I'm going to chase this rabbit down this particular hole for just a minute. Because I think one of the things that you're speaking to is actually something that our Colorado Springs mayor has talked about recently, which is the importance of creating what he calls a sticky community, right? Where people don't just grow up and leave, right? But if they do grow up, they stay, right? Or if they leave, they eventually come back, right? So he's talked a lot about trying to make Colorado Springs a sticky place to live. I don't know that I love the language, but I take the idea. And I think it actually leads to an important question, which is sort of what can communities do to assist schools, right? Especially sort of places of learning that are striving to increase levels of equity, right? That are striving to put persons of color in the classroom, right? That are striving to encourage students to see themselves as potential future educators, right? What can the community do other than, like, selling popcorn for the fundraiser? My kid is 6 and popcorn is all the rage. And I'm really tired of selling popcorn. What else can I do?
One very quick thing I guess I would mention is that it's quick, but it's kind of major. So I think one really important thing is to stay very connected to the schools that are in your community, regardless of whether or not you have children going to the schools. So, in our city, for example, in District 2, I think it was, I'm forgetting the exact amount of time, but I think it was maybe over a decade in which Harrison District 2 had not had such a bond pass, like such an increase in like infrastructure and like in like just things we could fundamentally spend on the school buildings. So I just wanted to bring that up, is that's something that actually did happen to District 2 recently. In 2018, there was a bond that was actually passed. And so that meant that everybody in the community needed to vote so that it would pass by a majority. And that actually happened. And it hadn't happened for almost, I think, a decade before that. So it was a major win for the residents and for our students and families, because it's a $180 million bond. So what that meant is that it's divided up between the schools in a few different strategic ways. And so it's allowing for all different kinds of like building and infrastructure improvements in the area. And that just hasn't happened in so long. And so people were involved in that, regardless of whether or not, necessarily they lived down the street from an elementary school and they pitched into the bake sale. It's more of a global way of thinking, like, what do we want for our community in which we live, regardless of like the actual like lower level or immediate level connection that a person might have with a school. So that was a huge win that I think I would just want to highlight, is like how can people be connected to something maybe that's bigger than themselves and bigger than their own immediate connections.
I do want to point out, so I love that Pani brought up the bond, because it happened in 2019. And they hadn't updated since 2009. And I know that only because I don't actually live in the district to teach in. I only know that because we had this fabulous, so one of our high school teachers talked to our students in high school about this. And we had a group of like 4 or 5 high school students who came to a faculty meeting and appealed to us and said, we have a door-to-door program to educate people about this bond and why we need it. And they got volunteers to go door-to-door and canvas with them. So I think that by having our high school teachers talk to our kids about the local issues that are affecting their communities, they literally saw this opportunity to go make a change, and they did. They had like several weekends where they took teachers and other high school students and went door to door with information about what that would mean to the community, whether or not the families that they were canvassing had students in schools or not. So I think that activism portion is huge, and promoting those sorts of programs too.
So, I mean, given all the great work Atlas is doing, and also given the fact that we're running short on time, I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't ask about some of the unique and general challenges that you face as educators. And in particular, I think one thing that's it's part of why we're doing this event like we are tonight is actually with the novel coronavirus pandemic, this has radically shifted modes of delivery of education. And so I think one thing we're probably curious about is, one, how has this affected Atlas's mission? And what methods, what tools, what resources have you employed or deployed to try to keep your mission going strong despite this
pandemic?
Yes.
The word you want is pandemic.
Yeah.
I just took myself off mute, but I think we're starting with Ben. Take it away, Ben. You want me to start? Okay, I'm going to pass it to you next. I think just quickly, I think that we've never been more in touch with our mission, to be honest. I think this is a year where we're really able to focus. Like we have an amazing mission, amazing goals. But this year we're really focusing on how can our families stay connected to us? How can our students stay connected to us? How can our students stay really engaged? And also how can we make sure that they're still going to grow this year and that we're getting results with them? So everything we're doing is kind of tagged to those three focus areas this year for us. And like Karina alluded to, we were able to very quickly get technology out to students in the spring, and then kind of refresh that for this school year. Once we knew we were going to be starting virtually, our elementary students have tablets. We're able to give them a lot of the materials that they need for remote learning. And our staff is like, I think you could probably throw any, and I've said this before, but I really, really think it, you could say any social problem in the world and you could give it to the Atlas Prep staff and they would figure out how to fix it, how to make it happen. And that's what they're doing now. So these people are just at such a high level of excellence with like what they deliver to students that you can visit any virtual classroom on any day of the week and you will see engaged students who are discussing with one another, who are asking questions, who are on camera. Just a specific example, Karina's class, one of her classes earlier in this week got really, really mad at her because she left the end of class with a cliffhanger in the novel that they were really, really interested in. And like that whole group of kids is going to come back the next day, Ms. Clark, like, let's go, let's get started. That's what they're doing. And obviously I would want them to speak about that, but just I think from from a high level, like these, you know, our staff is just doing amazing things. And I think we are just as connected as to families as we would be in any other situation, and maybe closer in some certain and really powerful ways. So I'll stop there.
I'll hop in and just build on that a little bit. I think that it's all about, or part of it at least, there's a lot to unpack there obviously, but part of it is just not being complacent with where we're at and the situation we're all in as educators and anyone in education, constantly continue to push the boundaries of your own development. One of the awesome things right now is that there's a group of math teachers right now where at the middle school we were fortunate enough to be a part of a professional development. I think we're on like week 9 now of it, kind of a thing, and we're able to meet virtually, of course, and really explore what is it to continue to push and challenge ourselves, but also our students. And how do we do that at the right level? Like how are we really getting the most out of this remote and virtual learning, but also completely kind of challenging the pedagogy of math also, right? And so just like this like weird world where we're like, okay, we want to do this and that, but oh no, we can't do this yet. But like, right, like really playing with it and seeing, hey, how can we push ourselves? How can we continue to push our students? And again, how can we spread that out also throughout like the whole math department later? Or how can we continue this across departments in addition to the close communication we have with families in that community, right? And really building that solid foundation so our students aren't missing out as much, so to speak, even though we are remote and we are all doing this virtual learning.
I think as far as counseling goes and the mission, In my mind, I'm like, we threw everything at it but the kitchen sink in some ways, and that's okay. But definitely we had to adjust, and we had to find ways to like make this more comfortable for students, especially now that everyone is in virtual classrooms. It's gotten a lot better. But at first, when you're contacting a student, you're like, hey, let's check in. Let's use this cool new video chat system called Zoom. Most kids felt panicked and didn't want to do that and be like, can we just text? And so now we're at this point where we're getting more and more students comfortable who are like actually coming into sessions. We're running virtual groups now, which are much more social focused, because I think that's one of the biggest pieces we're seeing that's detrimental for kids during all of this, especially middle school. It's such a huge time for social development, and it's a push away from a lot of those family ties and family bonds towards figuring out identity with your peers. And for kids who haven't had that for the past 9 months, it's really difficult. And so really just trying to find the needs, using our needs assessment, using our student perception survey, and then taking that and getting as creative as we can to build it into this new world that we're all living in.
Thank you. Yeah, so this leads into a question that I actually think about a lot, and I talk about a lot with my students, which is that one of the interesting things we seem to have done as a culture, right? Broadly, like insofar as we have culture, because that's a whole other question. But insofar as, right, we have a culture, it seems like one of the things we've done is we've pushed education as a panacea, right? And education is the way to solve our problems, right? And it sort of sounds like, based on what you're saying, if we just sent all kids to Atlas, we really could solve all our problems. But right, you're like, yeah, send them. But I think there's also a worry here, right? There's a worry about treating education as a panacea, and there's a worry about treating educators as sort of the heroes of our society, right? Because once you say that educators are heroes, well, you're either a hero or a villain, right? And so you get this, I think, kind of dichotomy in our society where educators are like valorized, right, as can do no wrong, they're going to solve everything for us, or like teachers are the worst, educators are the worst. And so I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about kind of that idea of education as a panacea and this dichotomy we see about how educators are treated in our society. I just like to throw out big questions. You have 3 minutes.
I know Ben has like a 6-word answer for this question, just to be like, if we need to cover it quickly.
I'll throw in my comment there. I'll make it a little longer than 6 words for you. No, I feel like there's I feel like people just fundamentally don't understand education, or there's just this very, again, traditional view of what education is and the role that it fits in with everything else. And I feel like that's really led to a lot of cultural differences in the views of appreciation and prioritization of education as a whole. For example, I think that, or just like speaking from experience here, it's a very highly respected profession in other cultures. And at the last school I taught at in the Bay Area, there was a large population of families who attended our school. They were first generation attending public school in the United States. And on multiple occasions, families would approach me, as well as other teachers, and say that they hope and that they want their students to be as successful as possible so they can be like us, meaning teachers. Because to them, that was like that was the pinnacle right there, of you're able to give back to your community, you're educated, you have a voice, it matters. And again, really tying back to that community piece, we don't have that in the United States. It's, Rebecca, I know you had something around it. I can't remember who had said it. I'm going to butcher it, kind of a thing of like where it falls kind of a thing. So I'm not going to approach that. But the prioritization of it and the respect around what it is as an institution and what it fulfills as a community and within the world, is just very different. So I'll leave my answer at that one. Those are my 6 words.
Yeah, all right, so here we go. This is our last minute lightning round question. What is the one most important thing that you want our audience to take away or remember about education?
Lightning round. Everybody has to play.
Just go.
Okay, I'll start. I think teachers are the most important factor in ensuring that students get opportunities in their lives. We have to invest in teachers. We have to support teachers. Anything and everything we can be doing for that is what I would want everybody to remember. They're the most important.
There's so much. I'm going to stick with like a simple thought and just say like education is a public service. So make sure you're advocating for what you want education to look like in your community and what needs you want it to fill for your community.
To throw that a little bit extra in there, get involved. Your voice matters. Education matters. Again, how do you want that to, what do you want to fulfill within your community, and use your voice to advocate for that positive change, and don't be complacent with what is already there.
I think the big takeaway I think people need to see is that, and this is our tagline as a school too, that education is beyond a school. It takes students, it takes parents, it takes home life and culture and money and opportunity and a whole lot of hard work to make it happen in a way that's really successful.
Oh man, and on those awesome notes, we are out of time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So panelists, thank you so much for giving us an hour and a half of your time on a Friday to talk about education, equality, political economy, everything that we covered, which was just sort of amazing to me. So thank you so much for all of that. I really appreciate it. And I sort of hope we can continue these conversations, because I think they're really amazing and so worth having, right? I think sometimes with education, one of the things that happens is everybody gets caught up in the nuts and bolts, right? Like, what is Common Core math and why don't I understand it? And we like fail to take this step back, right? To say like, what is it that we're trying to do with our young people, right? Like, what is it that we're trying to create in our communities, right? How are we trying to help? And so I think having these kinds of conversations is hopefully a first step, a step forward for just helping to make sure we all keep that in the forefront of our minds. So thank you so much. To our fabulous audience, thank you all so much for asking several fabulous questions.
And having an incredibly engaged conversation in the live stream while we're doing this.
Yeah, there's an incredible live stream chat. So panelists, you should go check it out after we're up on YouTube, because it was epic. That's what we were doing. We kept looking at the phone.
I promise I'm not just not paying attention.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So we had an epic live stream happening.
Yeah, audience, your voices do matter, right?
Yeah, your voices totally matter. We hear you. So this was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks to Jared.
Thanks. Yep. And thanks to Jared Werner.
Thank you, Jared.
Who's our fabulous tech person, who sort of in the background has been keeping us going for the entire evening. So audience, before you head out, I do just want to say again, thank you for attending Philosophy in the City. This is the final one of the year. However, we will be back in February 2021. I can't say it. 2021. See, no.
2021 is the next number.
No, I can't do it.
Okay.
I need a math teacher. Ben, I need help. But we will be back in February. And in February, we will be having a conversation with Professor De Silva about religious multiculturalism and whether we can truly have separation between church and state. So
it's going to be good.
It's going to be an epic topic coming up. So we hope to see you in February. And thank you all so much for joining. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.